Hi, welcome to my lecture discussing how we can move from the draft paragraph that we worked on during week one to the draft intro that we want to integrate into our schematic outline here during week two. This week we move into writing paper number one, and we do so through two steps. First, we want to take the informal ideas that we shared last week in our preliminary writers workshop get to know each other discussions and turn those into draft paragraphs. Then we're going to be integrating that draft paragraph into a schematic outline. The second activity is not the topic of this PowerPoint. You'll be doing that in the writing workshop that follows this lecture. This lecture really focuses on the first of these two steps, turning a draft paragraph into a draft intro. If you check out the rubric for paper number one, you will notice two evaluation criteria for the introduction: a vivid description of your work and a thesis statement. We're not going to work on your thesis statement until much later in the essay, so put that aside for now. What we're going to focus on in this video is how to compose a vivid and effective description of your work. A vivid description of your work has three key elements. First, it tells us where you work and what you do. Secondly, it uses sensory imagery to memorably describe some aspect of your work. It gets our attention with those striking details that interest us and get us engaged in where you want to take us. And finally, three, it communicates to the reader how you feel about your job. Are you positive? Are you negative? Or are you some mix of the two, which is very often the most common approach or response to our work. We're ambivalent. So let's get into it. Here's a strong example. This is from a couple of years ago, and I think it really meets the three criteria well. I'm going to read this one out loud, although the future examples in this video I'm going to ask you to pause and read on your own. If you're interested in the exact text of this, there's a transcript of this lecture that you can find right below the video lecture in Blackboard. So let's hear this intro. I've worked as a gardener in Orange County for 2 years. Before an optimistic reader imagines me as a noble figure, bathed in the glow of a Southern California sunset, carefully pruning delicate, richly scented flowers and Japanese shrubbery, let me clarify something. The glorified title of gardener disguises my true identity as weed picker, grass cutter, and yard cleanup specialist. And while I believe in the dignity of physical labor, celebrated by poets from the Old Testament and Virgil to Robert Frost, I do not believe that working myself to exhaustion for a wage that barely pays for my lunch and the gas I use to get to work enhances my human dignity. When, at the end of a day that starts at 5 in the morning and ends at 4, I collapse on my couch reeking of damp cut grass and lawnmower gasoline, I sometimes find myself paralyzed by a fear that this wage slavery is the only work I will ever find. I worry that all of my life, my clothes, my couch, my car, and my mind will be soaked by that ever-present trace of gasoline. And I see in that example all of the three elements. It tells us where this person works and what he does. There's vivid sensual, sensory image, in this case the gasoline, which isn't that sensual, I guess. And then it communicates to the reader how this person feels about the job. The sadness of those last couple sentences is almost overpowering. So let's move on and look at a couple other examples that aren't as strong, just to help you sort of flesh out your understanding. So this is a really strong intro. This is an A-level intro. Let's look at an intro that's from a very strong paper, the sample essay from Joshua we've been looking at. It's a very strong paper, but the intro is one of its major weaknesses. What I want to encourage you to do is stop the video now and read this paragraph. You've already seen it before, but take a few minutes to read through the paragraph and evaluate what's missing. Which of the three criteria we have been talking about for a good intro are and or are not here in this intro. So hopefully you paused for a second there and read carefully through the intro on your own. My comment on it is that Joshua really describes the experience of being hired, which is interesting, and I could see why he thought it would be a good setup, but he doesn't really tell us about the job itself. He doesn't describe the job for us, and he doesn't give us that sense of the connection between how he feels about the job and the vivid details of the job itself. So this certainly isn't a disastrous intro, but it really doesn't have the right focus on the work itself. It sort of sets up the essay more than defines the terms of engagement, which is really where we want to go. Let's take a look at one more intro that I would describe as stronger than Josh's, but still having something it needs to develop. So again, I'm going to ask you to pause the video here and take a few minutes and read this intro and see if you can identify its strengths and the things that could be further developed. This is a very first draft the student did, so the final version I know is going to be dazzling, but I wanted to share it because I received it from a student this week and I thought it was fun to have something that we could look at that was so immediate. So take a look at this and then come back after you pause and listen to my ideas about how this could be improved. So for my money, this paragraph does a great job of telling us where the writer works and what she does. It also clearly and effectively communicates how she feels about the job. You see it there in the final sentences. She loves this job. But the use of imagery and memorable description element of her paragraph still could use some work. Think of how much fun this writer could have using visual, auditory, and even olfactory imagery, that's imagery of smell, to paint a picture of what's going on in that nursery, in that child care area. Just there's so much to depict for us here. It'd be so wonderful to have a painting drawn for us so we could see this place that obviously this student really loves working in. All right, so you've got some basic principles. You have some examples to ponder. Now it's time for you to move on into the writer's workshop and create your own intro and add a schematic outline to it. So I'll see you over there in the writer's workshop. Thanks.